U.S. base in South Korea still within striking distance, Pyongyang warns. North Korea has warned that U.S. troops stationed at a new base in South Korea are still within striking range, adding that American forces will face a miserable end if they continue their reckless military confrontation. The North Korean military stated that even though the 8th U.S. Army Command on Tuesday moved to a new base in Pyeongtaek, some 70 kilometers, 43 miles, south of Seoul, the North can still successfully target the facility. The larger the U.S. military base is, the more effectively our military hits targets, a North Korean military spokesman said, Yonhap News Agency reported, citing the state-run Korean Central News Agency, KCNA. If the leadership issues an order, our military will destroy the U.S. imperialists with salvos of firings, the spokesman said. If the U.S. sticks to reckless military confrontation despite our warning, it cannot avoid a miserable end. The 8th U.S. Army Command made the move to its new base at Camp Humphreys on Tuesday, after more than a decade of planning. The $10.7 billion facility is set to become the largest continuous and most populated overseas installation, according to Stars and Stripes. Around 80% of the construction is complete, and the rest is expected to be finished in the next 12 to 18 months, 8th Army Commander Lieutenant General Thomas Vandal said, as cited by Stars and Stripes. Remaining units will be transferred once the facility has been completed. Funding and labor for the base, which will eventually replace Yongsan as the main U.S. military base in South Korea, has been mostly provided by Seoul. The 8th Army Command is the commanding formation of all American Army forces in South Korea. In total, the U.S. maintains around 28,500 service members in the East Asian country. Friday's threat by North Korea comes amid increased tensions between Washington and Pyongyang, with U.S. President Donald Trump repeatedly vowing to put an end to North Korea's nuclear and ballistic missile programs. Trump reiterated that threat earlier this month, after Pyongyang launched a ballistic missile test as a gift for the American bastards on U.S. Independence Day, July 4th. It's a shame they're behaving this way, they're behaving in a very, very dangerous manner and something will have to be done about it, President Trump said in a news conference following the North Korean launch. Pyongyang claimed the July 4th launch was particularly significant because it represented the first launch of a North Korean intercontinental ballistic missile, ICBM. However, South Korean intelligence services have since stated that the North is unlikely to have the technology to build such missiles, or the facilities to test them. Pyongyang has ignored all calls to cease missile tests and denuclearize and has continued to test the patience of its Asian neighbors, saying such programs are necessary to counter U.S. aggression. The U.S. and South Korea agreed to deploy the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense (THAAD) missile defense system last year, in response to Pyongyang's development of ballistic missiles and nuclear weapons. THAAD is designed to intercept short, medium and intermediate-range ballistic missiles during their terminal flight phase. The previous South Korean conservative government ratified the THAAD deal, while facing protests from people who were scared of becoming a target instead of being protected, as well as from environmentalists claiming the systems might harm natural habitats. Russia and China had called earlier this month for an alternative solution of the standoff to prevent a regional arms race and potential military confrontation, providing their own roadmap. The drought plan is based on double freezing, when Pyongyang halts its missile and nuclear programs, while South Korea and the U.S. cancel joint large-scale military exercises. The plan, however, was met with reluctance in Washington, which doubted Moscow's and Beijing's ability to influence North Korea, and refused to cancel its military drills. China and Russia shoot down sudden attack missiles in warning to Trump and Kim Jong-un. China and Russia have completed a week of military drills practicing for sudden and provocative attacks from North Korea and the U.S. As part of the drills, dubbed Airspace Security 2017, the People's Liberation Army Air Force and Russian Aerospace Forces troops prepared for ballistic and cruise missile attacks. Training for combat planning, commanding, firefighting coordination and other anti-missile operations also took place. North Korea has test-fired more than a dozen missiles in 2017, including 3 intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBM, capable of reaching the U.S. The exercise focused on how to jointly cope with any sudden and provocative attack from ballistic and cruise missiles on the two countries' territories, China's defense ministry said. Military experts believe the drills, which finished on Saturday, were carried out in response to escalating tensions over North Korea's nuclear and missile programs. Military analyst Song Songping said the exercises were aimed at North Korea and the U.S. The main target of the joint drills between China and Russia is the U.S., which has both ballistic and cruise missiles that could pose a real threat to both Beijing and Moscow, Song, a former member of the PLA's 2nd Artillery Corps, said. Both China and Russia wanted to use these joint anti-missile drills for strategic deterrence. They want to push the U.S. to withdraw its terminal high-altitude area defense, THAAD, from the Korean peninsula. Russia leader Vladimir Putin and Chinese President Xi Jinping are both readying their armies for the prospect of war, the worst-case scenario. It is believed Beijing would side with North Korea in a war against the U.S., being Kim's only traditional ally. Putin has repeatedly called for a diplomatic resolution to the crisis engulfing the Korean peninsula, but he has close ties with China. Military experts have urged China to prepare for war at any time. Shi Yanhong, an expert in international relations, said China, once a key ally of North Korea, is rapidly losing control of the situation on the Korean peninsula. Conditions on the peninsula now make for the biggest risk of a war in decades, said Yanhong, who advises China's government. North Korea warns U.S. that World War III nuke attack on the brink any moment now. North Korea has issued a fresh threat to Donald Trump that it is on the brink of a nuclear strike that would plunge the world into World War III. The state's foreign ministry said in a furious statement that the U.S. president should prepare for a nuclear war if he enforces a sea blockade to cut off the Hermit Kingdom. It comes after Kim Jong-un ended months of silence by firing a Hwasong-15 missile last month, boasting it was his most powerful yet and could reach the U.S. mainland. The statement, published by a Pyongyang newspaper, read, "The gang of Trump, being terrified by our accomplishment of the great historic cause of completing the state nuclear force, is driving the situation on the Korean peninsula more and more close to the brink of war, acting recklessly without any sense of reason. A naval blockade is an act of wanton violation of the sovereignty and dignity of an independent state and an act of war of aggression which cannot be tolerated. The gang of Trump is taking an extremely dangerous and big step towards the nuclear war by recklessly seeking the naval blockade against our country, neglecting the strategic prestige of our country that has achieved the great historic cause of completing the state nuclear force." The statement added it would not hesitate to strike back should Trump attempt the blockade. The newspaper, Express.co.uk reports, continued, "The naval blockade the gang of Trump is trying to pursue is something that was already tried and ended in vain during the collective sanctions campaign against the DPRK undertaken by the Bush administration under the signboard of Proliferation Security Initiative in the early 2000s. Should the U.S. and its followers try to enforce the naval blockade against our country, we will see it as an act of war and respond with merciless self-defensive countermeasures as we have warned repeatedly. The international society should increase its vigilance on the reckless moves of the U.S. trying to ignite a nuclear war on the Korean peninsula, and if the UNSC does not wish to see the Korean peninsula and the whole world plunging into a nuclear war, it should act properly in accordance with its original mission, which is to preserve peace and security of the world." Yesterday Daily Star Online revealed how South Korea warned the UN that Nuke Nut Kim was in the final stages of weaponizing his nuclear program. And China was also warned that it must be ready for war with the rogue state at any time, according to military advisors. North Korea war can't be stopped. China told to prepare army for conflict at any time. China must be ready for war to break out between North Korea and the U.S. at any time, military advisors have warned. Shi Yanhong, an expert in international relations, said China, once a key ally of North Korea, is rapidly losing control of the situation on the Korean peninsula. Conditions on the peninsula now make for the biggest risk of a war in decades, said Yanhong, who advises China's government. U.S. President Donald Trump has repeatedly called on China to put pressure on North Korea to curb its missile and nuclear programs. Amid this backdrop, Trump and North Korea leader Kim Jong-un have been exchanging chilling threats of military action and missile strikes. The communist leader stunned Trump last month by testing an intercontinental ballistic missile, ICBM, thought to be capable of reaching the U.S. In a sober analysis of the Yanhong said it is too late for China to stop war breaking out. Instead, China should seek to slam the brakes on a full-blown conflict, the best-case scenario, he said. North Korea is a time bomb. We can only delay the explosion, hoping that by delaying it, a time will come to remove the detonator, she said, speaking at a conference about the troubles. Wang Hongwang, a former Chinese military commander, said China should ready troops as war could erupt at any time between now and March next year. It is a highly dangerous period, Wang said. Northeast China should mobilize defenses for war. Experts fear North Korea could risk sparking World War III today by exploding a nuclear bomb to mark the death of his dad, Kim Jong-il. In a bombshell assessment, respected Washington, D.C. think tank Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, believe that North Korea will strike again on Sunday, December 17. That date is the anniversary of Kim's father, Kim Jong-il, who died in 2011 after taking power in 1997. Speaking to Daily Star Online, Michael Madden, founder and director of NK Leadership Watch, said it is certainly possible North Korea will fire a missile on that date. Analysis by Madden suggests that the next missile will not be a Hwasong-15, raising the possibility of the secretive state testing a new deadly weapon. North Korea issues U.S. threat, whole world will plunge into nuclear war. North Korea has sent a dire warning to the USA, telling President Donald Trump to prepare for a nuclear war if he attempts a sea blockade of the hermit state. North Korea's foreign ministry has issued a furious statement this weekend, saying American aggression cannot be tolerated. The fiery statement, which was issued in a Pyongyang-based propaganda newspaper yesterday, said Donald Trump was terrified of North Korea's nuclear progress. And it said any attempt to strangle North Korea with sanctions or a blockade would receive a furious response. The statement said, "The gang of Trump, being terrified by our accomplishment of the great historic cause of completing the state nuclear force, is driving the situation on the Korean peninsula more and more close to the brink of war, acting recklessly without any sense of reason. A naval blockade is an act of wanton violation of the sovereignty and dignity of an independent state and an act of war of aggression which cannot be tolerated. The gang of Trump is taking an extremely dangerous and big step towards the nuclear war by recklessly seeking the naval blockade against our country, neglecting the strategic prestige of our country that has achieved the great historic cause of completing the state nuclear force." The ministry said Mr. Trump's hardline tactics had been attempted unsuccessfully in the past. It said, "The naval blockade the gang of Trump is trying to pursue is something that was already tried and ended in vain during the collective sanctions campaign against the DPRK undertaken by the Bush administration under the Signboard of Proliferation Security Initiative in the early 2000s. Should the U.S. and its followers try to enforce the naval blockade against our country, we will see it as an act of war and respond with merciless self-defensive countermeasures as we have warned repeatedly." The statement ended with the warning the whole world could erupt into nuclear war. Pyongyang urged the West to preserve peace and not risk all-out conflict. It said, the international society should increase its vigilance on the reckless moves of the U.S. trying to ignite a nuclear war on the Korean Peninsula, and if the UNSC does not wish to see the Korean Peninsula and the whole world plunging into a nuclear war, it should act properly in accordance with its original mission, which is to preserve peace and security of the world. And today North Korea mocked Donald Trump as an old lunatic who spouts a lot of rubbish in a bizarre rant against the USA. The opinion piece in Minju Chosun, one of North Korea's several propaganda rags, told Mr. Trump to temper his policy with the hermit state. It said, frightened by the DPRK's successful test fire of ICBM Hwasong-15, old lunatic Trump talked about way of serious approach. They had better cool their heads heated by war hysteria and be prudent if they don't want to meet bitterer disgrace and destruction. U.S. sends hundreds of troops to destroy North Korea's nukes in Warrior Strike mission. Hundreds of U.S. troops have taken part in training to infiltrate and destroy North Korea's cache of nuclear weapons and missiles, according to military sources. Drills to destroy weapons of mass destruction possessed by North Korea were carried out by U.S. and South Korean forces earlier this week. From Tuesday to Friday, troops took part in the Warrior Strike exercise at Camp Stanley, north of South Korean capital Seoul. The drill was overseen by top military officials, including General Young Kyung-do, chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Vincent K. Brooks, commander of U.S. Forces Korea. The drills took place ahead of December 17, the date former North Korea Supreme Leader Kim Jong-il died of a heart attack. North Korea experts believed his son and successor, Kim Jong-un, was planning to use the date to fire a nuclear-tipped missile dubbed the Judgebird. Although the day passed without incident, the U.S. and South Korea is on high alert for further provocations from the totalitarian state. The communist nation stunned the world in July by successfully carrying out its first test of an intercontinental ballistic missile, ICBM, that can reach the U.S. In the wake of that test, U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to totally destroy North Korea and unleash fire and fury if forced to do so. In a letter to military chiefs, U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis suggested a ground invasion of North Korea is the only way to destroy its weapons.